In the heart of occupied Europe during World War II, a quiet revolution was taking place, one that would challenge the very fabric of oppression. The German occupation of Belgium and the Netherlands, which began in May 1940, was marked by a heavy hand of control, yet beneath the surface, a tapestry of resistance was being woven by those who were often overlooked, the women. While the German military marched through the streets with an air of superiority, they failed to recognize the power of the seemingly mundane activities that filled the lives of the occupied. Among these activities was knitting, a craft that would soon become a vital tool for espionage and resistance. As German soldiers patrolled the cobblestone streets of Brussels and Amsterdam, they observed groups of women gathered in parks, cafes, and homes, their needles clicking rhythmically as they crafted garments for their families. To the occupying forces, these gatherings appeared harmless, a trivial pastime that offered a brief respite from the harsh realities of war. However, what the soldiers dismissed as mere domesticity was, in fact, a sophisticated network of communication and resistance. The women, driven by a sense of duty and a desire to contribute to the fight against tyranny, began to encode messages within their knitting patterns, transforming a traditional craft into a powerful weapon against oppression. The streets of these occupied cities were filled with tension, as the German military sought to maintain control over the populace. Daily life was fraught with uncertainty. Curfews were enforced, food rations were strictly regulated, and the threat of arrest loomed large over anyone suspected of dissent. Yet, in the midst of this oppressive atmosphere, the women found solace and strength in their knitting circles. They gathered not only to create warm clothing for their loved ones but also to share news, exchange information, and coordinate efforts to undermine the occupiers. Each stitch became a symbol of defiance, a testament to their resilience in the face of adversity. When the war progressed, the role of these knitting circles evolved. The women recognized that their gatherings could serve a dual purpose. While they crafted garments, they also encoded vital intelligence about German troop movements and logistics. The patterns they created, once seen as trivial, became a lifeline for the resistance, providing crucial information that would aid in the fight for liberation. The German troops, oblivious to the true significance of the women's activities, continued to mock their knitting, unaware that they were underestimating a formidable force of resistance. This narrative of resilience and ingenuity is not merely a footnote in the annals of history, it is a powerful reminder of the impact that ordinary individuals can have in extraordinary circumstances. The women of Belgium and the Netherlands, through their knitting, wove a story of courage that would resonate long after the war ended. Their ability to transform a domestic craft into a tool of resistance speaks to the strength of the human spirit and the power of creativity in the face of oppression. To fully appreciate the significance of the knitting circles in Belgium and the Netherlands during World War II, it is essential to understand the broader context of the German occupation and the daily lives of the civilians living under its shadow. The invasion of Belgium and the Netherlands in May 1940 marked the beginning of a brutal occupation that would last for several years. The German military quickly established control over these territories, implementing strict regulations and instilling fear among the populace. Daily life in occupied cities was characterized by scarcity and uncertainty. Rationing became a way of life, with food and essential goods in short supply. The German authorities imposed curfews, limiting movement and creating an atmosphere of constant surveillance. Families struggled to make ends meet, often relying on the black market for basic necessities. The psychological toll of living under occupation was immense, as the threat of arrest or deportation loomed over anyone suspected of dissent. In this oppressive environment, women found themselves in a unique position. With many men conscripted into the military or involved in resistance activities, women became the backbone of their communities, taking on roles that extended beyond traditional domestic duties. They managed households, cared for children, and sought ways to support the war effort, often at great personal risk. The knitting circles that emerged during this time were not merely social gatherings, they were vital hubs of communication and coordination for the resistance. The concept of knitting as a form of resistance was not entirely new. Throughout history, crafts and domestic activities have often served as a means of expression and defiance. In the context of World War II, however, the women of Belgium and the Netherlands took this idea to new heights. They began to develop a system of encoding messages within their knitting patterns, using a combination of stitches to convey vital information about German troop movements, supply routes, and other intelligence. The logistics of this resistance effort were complex. Women would gather in small groups, often in private homes or secluded locations, to avoid detection. They exchanged news and information, discussing the latest developments on the front lines and coordinating efforts to undermine the occupiers. The knitting patterns they created became a language of resistance, a way to communicate without arousing suspicion. Each stitch held meaning. A simple purl could indicate a change in troop movements, while a series of knit stitches might denote the schedule of military trains. The success of this covert communication relied heavily on the women's ability to maintain the facade of domesticity. To the untrained eye, their knitting appeared to be nothing more than intricate designs, the kind that any skilled knitter might produce. However, for those in the know, each pattern was a carefully crafted message, a piece of the larger puzzle that was the resistance effort. This duality of purpose, creating garments while simultaneously gathering and disseminating intelligence, was a testament to the women's ingenuity and determination. In the later years of the war, the knitting circles became increasingly important to the resistance movement. The intelligence they provided was crucial for planning and executing operations against the German forces. The women's efforts contributed to several key missions, including sabotage operations and the coordination of supply drops for resistance fighters. Their work, though largely unrecognized at the time, played a significant role in the broader resistance movement, highlighting the critical contributions of civilians in wartime. The knitting circles also served as a means of solidarity among women. In a time when traditional gender roles were being challenged, these gatherings provided a space for women to come together, share their experiences, and support one another. The bonds forged in these circles transcended the act of knitting. They became a source of strength and resilience in the face of adversity. The women's ability to adapt and innovate in their resistance efforts was a reflection of their commitment to the cause and their desire to contribute to the liberation of their countries. In conclusion, the knitting circles of Belgium and the Netherlands during World War II were far more than simple gatherings of women engaged in a domestic craft. They represented a vital form of resistance, a testament to the ingenuity and resilience of those living under occupation. By the time the war unfolded, these circles evolved into a sophisticated network of communication and coordination, highlighting the critical role that women played in the fight against tyranny. Their legacy, woven into the very fabric of history, serves as a powerful reminder of the impact that ordinary individuals can have in extraordinary circumstances. By mid-1943, the effectiveness of the knitting circles had not gone unnoticed. Reports of unusual patterns in the knitting of local women began to circulate among German intelligence officers. However, these reports were largely dismissed as mere coincidence, a reflection of the occupiers' continued underestimation of the women's capabilities. The German troops, still mocking the women's knitting as inconsequential, failed to grasp the true significance of their craft. By the time the Allies ramped up their efforts, the need for accurate intelligence became more pressing. The resistance's knitting patterns, once dismissed as trivial, began to yield vital information that was crucial for planning and executing operations against the German forces. The women's ability to relay this information, often under the noses of their occupiers, was a testament to their skill and ingenuity. Despite the growing threat posed by the knitting circles, the German forces remained largely oblivious to the true nature of the women's activities. Their mockery, once a source of frustration for the women, had become a shield, allowing them to continue their work without arousing suspicion. However, as the war dragged on and the stakes grew higher, the resistance knew that it was only a matter of time before the Germans would catch on. In late 1943, British intelligence intercepted communications that hinted at the coded messages being transmitted through knitting. Analysts began to decode the patterns, revealing crucial information about troop movements and train schedules that were vital for Allied operations. This revelation shocked both the British and the Germans, as it highlighted the ingenuity of the resistance and the underestimation of women's roles in warfare. The exposure of the knitting code led to increased scrutiny from German forces, who began to intensify their surveillance and repression of suspected resistance members. The women, aware of the growing danger, continued to knit in secret, their resolve unshaken by the threat of discovery. They knew that their work was vital to the resistance effort and that the information they provided could mean the difference between success and failure for the Allies. The confrontation between the knitting circles and the German forces was a battle of wits, a test of the women's ability to outsmart their occupiers. Despite the increased pressure, the women remained steadfast, their needles clicking steadily as they crafted patterns that would help turn the tide of the war. Their bravery and determination became a symbol of hope for those living under occupation, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, resistance was possible. As the conflict neared the enduring legacy of the women's knitting circles began to emerge. Their stories, once hidden in the shadows, were brought to light, highlighting their contributions to the resistance and the war effort. The knitting patterns, once a source of derision, had become emblematic of the broader struggle against oppression, showcasing the power of creativity and resourcefulness in the face of adversity. The German command, increasingly aware of the potential threat posed by these knitting circles, initiated a campaign to root out suspected resistance members. This campaign was marked by a series of raids and arrests, targeting homes where knitting was known to occur. The atmosphere of fear and suspicion grew palpable, as neighbors turned against one another, and the women who had once gathered freely now found themselves in a precarious position. In response to the heightened scrutiny, the women adapted their methods. They began to meet in smaller groups, often in the dead of night, in secluded locations that were less likely to attract attention. The knitting circles transformed from public displays of solidarity into clandestine operations, where every click of the needles was accompanied by whispered conversations about the latest news from the front lines. The women also became more ingenious in their encoding techniques. They developed a more complex system of patterns, incorporating variations in color and texture to further obscure their messages. A simple scarf could now convey detailed information about the timing of troop movements, while a patterned shawl might indicate the location of German supply depots. The knitting, once a mundane task, had evolved into a sophisticated form of communication that required both skill and creativity. As the Allies began to launch more coordinated attacks, the intelligence provided by the knitting circles proved invaluable. The women's coded messages allowed resistance fighters to anticipate German movements, enabling them to execute sabotage operations with greater precision. The knitting circles became a vital part of the resistance infrastructure, their contributions often overlooked in the grand narrative of the war. Despite the risks, the women remained committed to their cause. They understood that their work was not just about knitting, it was about defiance, about standing up against an oppressive regime that sought to silence them. Each stitch was a testament to their resilience, a symbol of their refusal to be cowed by the occupying forces. As 1944 approached, the situation grew increasingly dire. The German response to the knitting circles intensified, with reports of arrests and executions of suspected resistance members becoming more frequent. The women knew that they were playing a dangerous game, yet their determination only deepened. They were not just knitting for themselves, they were knitting for their families, their communities, and their countries. The knitting circles became a source of inspiration for others as well. Stories of their bravery spread through underground networks, encouraging more women to join the resistance effort. The act of knitting, once seen as a mundane domestic task, transformed into a powerful symbol of rebellion. Women from all walks of life began to pick up their needles, joining the fight in whatever way they could. While the war progressed, the knitting circles also faced the challenge of maintaining morale among their members. The constant threat of arrest and the toll of war weighed heavily on the women. They found solace in their gatherings, sharing not only their knitting but also their fears and hopes. The act of creating something beautiful amidst the chaos of war became a source of strength, a reminder of their shared humanity. The confrontation between the knitting circles and the German forces was not just a battle of intelligence, it was a struggle for identity and agency. The women, often relegated to the sidelines of history, were now at the forefront of the resistance. Their actions challenged the traditional narratives of war, highlighting the vital contributions of civilians, particularly women, in the fight against tyranny. As the Allies prepared for major offensives in 1944, the intelligence gathered through the knitting circles became increasingly critical. The women's coded messages provided insights that were instrumental in planning operations, including the D-Day invasion. The bravery of these women, who risked their lives for the cause, became a symbol of resilience and resistance against oppression. Yet, the cost of this bravery was high. Families were torn apart, communities devastated by the loss of loved ones. The women who survived carried with them the scars of their struggle, both physical and emotional. Their stories, once hidden in the shadows, began to emerge, shedding light on the sacrifices made in the name of freedom. As the conflict neared the enduring legacy of the knitting circles transformed from a tool of mockery to one of empowerment and recognition. Their contributions to the resistance and the war effort were finally acknowledged, and their stories became a testament to the power of courage and creativity in the face of adversity. The confrontation between the knitting circles and the German forces was a defining moment in the narrative of World War II. It underscored the importance of civilian resistance and the often overlooked roles that women played in the fight against tyranny. The knitting circles, once dismissed as trivial, had become a formidable force, their legacy forever etched into the annals of history. As the year 1943 drew to a close, the war in Europe had reached a fever pitch. The Allies were making significant strides, but the need for precise intelligence was more critical than ever. It was during this time that a seemingly innocuous activity, dismissed by many as mere domesticity, would reveal its true significance. The knitting circles of Belgium and the Netherlands, once the subject of ridicule by occupying German forces, were about to become a focal point of intrigue and admiration. The revelation began with a series of intercepted communications by British intelligence. Analysts at Bletchley Park, already renowned for their work on the Enigma Code, stumbled upon references to unusual patterns in civilian activities within occupied territories. Initially, these references seemed trivial, but a persistent analyst, intrigued by the repeated mention of knitting, decided to investigate further. What emerged was a sophisticated code embedded within the very fabric of these knitting projects. The patterns, it turned out, were not random. Each stitch, each row, was meticulously planned to convey specific information. Purl stitches might indicate troop movements, while a series of knit stitches could denote train schedules. The complexity of the code was astounding, yet its simplicity in execution was its greatest strength. Women, often overlooked in the machinations of war, had found a way to turn their domestic skills into a weapon of resistance. As British intelligence began to decode these patterns, the breadth of information uncovered was staggering. Detailed accounts of German troop deployments, supply routes, and even the timing of military trains were all hidden within the threads. This intelligence was invaluable, providing the Allies with insights that would prove crucial in planning operations across Europe. The Germans, for their part, remained largely oblivious to the true nature of the knitting circles. Despite increased reports of unusual knitting activities, the idea that these women could be orchestrating such an elaborate scheme was beyond their comprehension. It was a testament to the pervasive underestimation of women's roles during the war, a miscalculation that would cost them dearly. For the women involved, the stakes were incredibly high. They knew that discovery would mean severe punishment, yet their commitment to the cause never wavered. In small, dimly lit rooms, they gathered, needles clicking softly, as they wove the defiance into every stitch. Their bravery was matched only by their ingenuity, as they continued to adapt their codes to evade detection. The revelation of the knitting code was a turning point, not only in the intelligence war but also in the broader narrative of the conflict. It challenged the traditional perceptions of gender roles and highlighted the critical contributions of civilians, particularly women, in the resistance effort. The knitting circles, once a source of derision, were now recognized as a formidable element of the resistance, their legacy forever etched into the annals of history. The revelation of the knitting code also sparked a wave of interest among resistance movements across Europe. Inspired by the ingenuity of the Belgian and Dutch women, other groups began to explore similar methods of covert communication. The knitting circles became a model for how everyday activities could be transformed into powerful tools of resistance, encouraging more civilians to participate in the fight against tyranny. While the war progressed, the knitting circles faced new challenges. The German response to the exposure of the coded messages was swift and brutal. Increased surveillance and crackdowns on suspected resistance members became commonplace. The women, aware of the growing danger, continued to knit in secret, their resolve unshaken by the threat of discovery. They knew that their work was vital to the resistance effort and that the information they provided could mean the difference between success and failure for the Allies. The revelation of the knitting code also had a profound impact on the morale of the resistance. The knowledge that their efforts were yielding tangible results reinvigorated the women, who had been operating under constant fear. They found strength in their shared purpose, knitting not just for their families but for the liberation of their countries. The revelation of the knitting code sent shockwaves through the German command. What had once been dismissed as idle pastime was now understood to be a sophisticated network of espionage. The German response was swift and severe. In a desperate bid to regain control, they intensified their surveillance and repression of suspected resistance members. Across Belgium and the Netherlands, knitting circles became targets of suspicion. Women who had once knitted openly in public spaces now found themselves under the watchful eyes of German patrols. The atmosphere grew tense, as the occupiers sought to root out the source of the leaks. Many women were arrested, interrogated, and some even executed for their involvement. The risk was immense, yet the knitting continued in secret, driven by a sense of duty and defiance. The intelligence gathered through these coded messages played a pivotal role in several Allied operations. Most notably, it contributed to the planning of D-Day, the largest amphibious invasion in history. The detailed information about German troop movements and logistics helped the Allies to strategize effectively, ultimately leading to the successful landing on the beaches of Normandy on June 6, 1944. The bravery of these women, who risked their lives for the cause, became a symbol of resilience and resistance against tyranny. Their actions demonstrated that even the smallest acts of defiance could have a profound impact on the course of history. The knitting circles, once a source of mockery, were now celebrated as heroes of the resistance. As the knitting circles' coded messages began to unravel the fabric of German military operations, the consequences of their ingenuity became increasingly dire. The German command, now aware that their underestimation of civilian life had led to a significant intelligence breach, reacted with a mixture of panic and aggression. The knitting circles, once a source of amusement for the occupying forces, were now seen as a serious threat to their control over occupied territories. The German response was swift and brutal. In a desperate attempt to regain the upper hand, they initiated a campaign of repression against suspected resistance members. Women who had once gathered in the safety of their homes to knit and share information now faced the very real threat of arrest, torture, and execution. The atmosphere of fear intensified, as German patrols increased their surveillance of neighborhoods known for resistance activities. The knitting circles, which had thrived on community and solidarity, now operated under the shadow of suspicion and danger. The moral dilemmas faced by the women involved in these knitting circles became increasingly complex. Many were forced to weigh their commitment to the resistance against the safety of their families. Some women chose to continue their activities, driven by a sense of duty to their country and the belief that their contributions were vital to the Allied cause. Others, however, found themselves torn between loyalty to their comrades and the instinct to protect their loved ones from the repercussions of their actions. In one poignant example, a woman named Marie, a mother of 3, found herself at a crossroads. She had been actively involved in the knitting circles, using her skills to encode messages that provided critical intelligence to the Allies. However, as the German forces intensified their crackdown, Marie began to fear for her children's safety. After much deliberation, she made the heart-wrenching decision to step back from her role in the resistance, believing that her absence would shield her family from the wrath of the occupiers. This decision, while made out of love, haunted her for the rest of her life, a constant reminder of the sacrifices made during wartime. Despite the growing dangers, many women chose to remain engaged in the resistance. Their resolve was bolstered by the knowledge that their efforts were making a tangible difference. The intelligence gathered through their knitting patterns played a pivotal role in several key Allied operations, including sabotage missions that targeted German supply lines and troop movements. Each successful operation fueled the women's determination, reinforcing their belief that their actions, however small, were contributing to the larger fight for freedom. The knitting circles also became a source of inspiration for other resistance groups. As news of their success spread, more women joined the effort, eager to contribute in whatever way they could. The knitting code became a symbol of resilience, a testament to the power of ordinary people to effect change in extraordinary circumstances. The women's courage and ingenuity inspired men and women alike, fostering a spirit of unity and determination that transcended gender roles and societal expectations. However, the cost of this bravery was steep. With the increased scrutiny from German forces, many women were arrested, some never to return home. The stories of these women, once celebrated for their contributions, became cautionary tales of the dangers of resistance. Families were torn apart, and communities were left to grapple with the loss of their loved ones. The knitting circles, no longer a beacon of hope, bore the weight of grief and sacrifice. While the war progressed, the effect of the knitting circles on the broader resistance movement became undeniable. The intelligence they provided was instrumental in planning major operations, including the D-Day invasion. The meticulous details encoded in their knitting patterns helped Allied forces to strategize effectively, ultimately leading to the successful landing on the beaches of Normandy on June 6, 1944. The bravery of these women, who risked everything for the cause, became a symbol of resilience and resistance against tyranny. Yet, the enduring legacy of the knitting circles was not without its complexities. In the aftermath of the war, the stories of those who had been arrested or executed began to surface, revealing the harsh realities faced by women in the resistance. The moral dilemmas they encountered during the war continued to haunt them, as they grappled with the choices they had made in the name of freedom. For many, the scars of their experiences would linger long after the war had ended. The knitting circles, once a source of mockery, had transformed into a powerful symbol of resistance. Their contributions to the war effort were finally acknowledged, and their stories began to emerge from the shadows. The knitting patterns, once dismissed as trivial, became emblematic of the broader struggle against oppression, showcasing the power of creativity and resourcefulness in the face of adversity. As the dust settled after the end of World War II, Europe faced the daunting task of rebuilding. The war had left deep scars on the continent, and the memories of occupation and resistance were still fresh in the minds of those who had lived through it. In this context of recovery, the stories of the women who had used knitting as a tool of resistance began to emerge, transforming their legacy from one of derision to one of empowerment. In the immediate aftermath of the war, the contributions of these women were often overshadowed by the larger narratives of military victories and political realignments. The focus was primarily on the strategies employed by military leaders and the sacrifices made by soldiers on the front lines. However, as historians and journalists began to delve deeper into the complexities of the war, the remarkable stories of the knitting circles began to gain recognition. Organizations dedicated to preserving the memory of resistance fighters emerged, ensuring that the sacrifices made by these women would not be forgotten. In Belgium and the Netherlands, memorials were erected, and ceremonies held to honor their contributions. The knitting patterns, once a source of derision, became emblematic of the broader struggle against oppression, showcasing the power of creativity and resourcefulness in the face of adversity. The transformation of the knitting circle's legacy also had a profound impact on societal perceptions of gender roles. During the war, women had stepped into roles traditionally occupied by men, proving their capabilities in a wide range of fields. The recognition of their contributions to the resistance further challenged traditional gender norms, paving the way for greater equality in the post-war era. The stories of these women became a rallying cry for those advocating for women's rights, highlighting the importance of recognizing and valuing the contributions of women in all spheres of life. As the stories of these women gained prominence, they inspired a new generation to recognize the power of ordinary acts in the fight against tyranny. Their legacy became a symbol of resilience and hope, encouraging individuals to stand up against injustice, no matter the odds. The knitting circles, once a symbol of domesticity, had become a powerful emblem of resistance and empowerment. In the years following the war, educational programs began to embrace the account of the knitting circles, using it to teach students about the complexities of war and the importance of civilian contributions. Workshops and lectures were organized, allowing young people to learn about the courage and determination of these women, gaining a deeper understanding of the sacrifices made in the pursuit of freedom. The knitting patterns, once mere artifacts of a bygone era, became tools for education, illustrating the intersection of creativity and resistance. The enduring legacy of the knitting circles extended beyond the borders of Belgium and the Netherlands. Their story resonated with individuals around the world, inspiring movements for justice and equality. In a time when women were often relegated to the sidelines, the knitting circles demonstrated that they were not only capable but essential to the resistance effort. Their actions challenged the status quo, paving the way for future generations to advocate for their rights and the rights of others. As we reflect on their courage, we recognize that the legacy of these women is not just a historical footnote but a living testament to the power of resilience and hope. Their story continues to inspire, reminding us that in the darkest of times, creativity and determination can light the way forward. The knitting circles, once a source of derision, have become a beacon of empowerment, their legacy woven into the very fabric of history. In conclusion, the aftermath of World War II saw the knitting circles transform from a symbol of mockery to one of empowerment and recognition. The contributions of these women to the resistance effort were finally acknowledged, and their stories became a testament to the power of courage and creativity in the face of adversity. Their legacy serves as a reminder that even the smallest acts of defiance can have a profound impact on the course of history, inspiring future generations to stand up against oppression and injustice. The enduring legacy of the women who encoded messages in their knitting during World War II is a powerful testament to the resilience and ingenuity of ordinary individuals in extraordinary circumstances. As Europe emerged from the devastation of war, the stories of these women began to surface, transforming their roles from mere participants in domestic life to celebrated figures of resistance. Their contributions not only aided the Allied forces but also challenged societal norms regarding gender, leaving an indelible mark on history. In the immediate aftermath of the war, the narratives surrounding the resistance were often dominated by military achievements and high-profile leaders. However, as historians and scholars began to delve deeper into the complexities of wartime experiences, the stories of women like those in the knitting circles gained prominence. These women, who had once been relegated to the background, were now recognized for their critical roles in the resistance movement. Their ability to blend domesticity with espionage showcased a unique form of resistance that was both subtle and effective. The post-war period was marked by a significant shift in societal attitudes towards women. The war had necessitated the involvement of women in roles traditionally held by men, and their contributions during this time laid the groundwork for future advancements in gender equality. The recognition of the knitting circles as vital components of the resistance movement played a crucial role in this transformation. Women who had once been confined to the domestic sphere were now celebrated for their courage and resourcefulness, paving the way for greater participation in public life. In Belgium and the Netherlands, the enduring legacy of the knitting circles was particularly pronounced. Women who had participated in these covert operations began to share their stories, often in community gatherings or through local publications. Their narratives not only highlighted their bravery but also served as a source of inspiration for younger generations. The impact of these stories extended beyond individual recognition. They contributed to a broader cultural shift that emphasized the importance of women's contributions to society. As the war memories faded, the knitting circles became emblematic of a new understanding of resistance. They represented the idea that heroism could take many forms, not just those associated with combat. This redefinition of bravery resonated with many, leading to a greater appreciation for the diverse ways in which individuals contributed to the war effort. The knitting circles became a symbol of the strength found in community and collaboration, illustrating how collective action could lead to significant change. In the decades following the war, efforts to commemorate the contributions of women in the resistance gained momentum. Memorials were erected in honor of those who had risked their lives for freedom, and annual ceremonies were established to remember the sacrifices made during the occupation. These commemorative events often included tributes to the knitting circles, recognizing their unique role in the resistance. In Belgium, for instance, the city of Brussels established a memorial dedicated to the women of the resistance. This monument not only honored their bravery but also served as a reminder of the importance of remembering history. The memorial featured a depiction of women knitting, symbolizing the duality of their roles as both caretakers and warriors. Such public recognition helped to solidify the knitting circle's place in the collective memory of the nation. In the Netherlands, similar initiatives took shape. Local museums began to curate exhibitions that highlighted the contributions of women during the war, with a particular focus on the knitting circles. These exhibitions showcased not only the knitted patterns that carried vital intelligence but also personal stories of the women involved. Artifacts, photographs, and first-hand accounts were displayed, allowing visitors to connect with the past in a meaningful way. Educational programs also emerged, aimed at teaching younger generations about the significance of the knitting circles and the broader resistance movement. Schools incorporated these narratives into their curricula, fostering a sense of pride and awareness among students. By highlighting the contributions of women, educators sought to inspire a new generation to recognize the power of ordinary acts of defiance in the face of tyranny. The long-term impact of the knitting circles extended far beyond the immediate post-war years. Their legacy became intertwined with the ongoing struggle for gender equality and social justice. As women around the world continued to fight for their rights, the stories of those who had resisted during the war served as a source of inspiration and empowerment. The knitting circles also influenced the way resistance movements were perceived in the context of warfare. Their story demonstrated that resistance could take many forms, challenging the notion that heroism was solely defined by military action. This broader understanding of resistance has continued to resonate in contemporary movements, where individuals often employ creative and nonviolent methods to challenge oppression. In popular culture, the enduring legacy of the knitting circles has been immortalized in literature, film, and art. Documentaries and historical novels have explored their stories, bringing their experiences to a wider audience. These portrayals not only honor the women who participated but also serve to educate future generations about the importance of resilience and creativity in the fight against injustice. Moreover, the knitting circles have become a symbol of the power of community and collaboration. In a world that often emphasizes individualism, their story serves as a reminder that collective action can lead to significant change. The women who gathered to knit during the war exemplified the strength found in unity, inspiring contemporary movements that prioritize solidarity and cooperation. As we reflect on the enduring legacy of the women who encoded messages in their knitting, we recognize that their contributions extend far beyond the confines of history. They serve as a powerful reminder of the importance of resilience, creativity, and community in the face of adversity. The knitting circles, once a source of mockery, have transformed into a beacon of empowerment, their legacy woven into the very fabric of history. In a world still grappling with conflict and inequality, the stories of these women continue to inspire those who fight against oppression. Their courage and ingenuity remind us that even the smallest acts of defiance can have a profound impact on the course of history. As we honor their memory, we are called to recognize the power of ordinary individuals to effect change, to stand up against tyranny, and to weave a brighter future for generations to come.